Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on January 10th, 2025. Today you're tuning in for NAHASDA Essentials. This is the 5th of 5 days in a training series, and this is being instructed by Cheryl A. Cosley. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled you could join us today for the webinar. If you could follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud, please. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. There is a pretty lengthy list of really helpful resource materials that Cheryl has put together for you for this webinar series. In order to access that, you can go to the courses section. And then if you click on NAHASDA Essentials and click through the course, there will be 2 pages with links to every single one listed so that you can download copies for yourself. She references them throughout the presentation, but you can just download them after the fact. If you did just click out, you can rejoin by clicking on that green banner. That's how you can always join our webinars on this new platform. We ask that when you join and it does the sound test, that you do listen only so that we can cut down on any kind of audio feedback and we only have our instructor speaking. If you join and you notice that the sound isn't coming out of the correct audio that you would like, you can click on that little phone icon down at the bottom of your screen and you can change it to the speaker that you would prefer your sound to be coming from. There's a lot of different ways you can interact with the webinar today. The main one's going to be obviously using the public chat. We also have some shared notes for you with a list of links. I'm actually going to copy and paste those links into the chat right now. One of them is the feedback survey for today's webinar, and the second one down is a copy of the presentation slides so that you can download a copy for yourself. So again, the presentation slides, I've just put the link to download them into that public chat. While y'all are in there pulling today's slides, please take a moment to also introduce yourself if you haven't already. Let us know your name, where you're joining us from, your work or your role in Indian country that's led you to this webinar, as well as your tribal affiliation if you have one. And then just a quick final note, if you click on that red menu panel that's all the way to the left-hand side of your screen, just know that it's going to pull you out of the webinar and it'll take you, wherever you clicked on. You can always just rejoin by clicking that green banner at the top of the screen. All right, it is with great pleasure. I hand it off to you, Cheryl, for NAHASDA Essentials Day 5. Let me make you presenter.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Welcome to Day 5. Happy Friday, guys. We made it. Glad to see you back. So welcome and good afternoon. You guys all know who I am by now, but just because it's getting recorded, my name is Cheryl Cosley. My Anishinaabe name is Redbird Woman. I'm Loon Clan and I come from Keno-Shinkoning in my language, which is Place of the Pike. That's the Bay Mills Indian Reservation. We're located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and our waters actually border Canada. So I served as my tribe's director of housing for over 28 years. During that time, I served on the National American Indian Housing Council, started as a secretary, became the vice chair, did that for 12 years, and then I was a 2-term, 4-year chairperson of that organization. I also worked with the Great Lakes Indian Housing Association, 31 tribes surrounding the Great Lakes, and served as their chairperson off and on for 7 years. I've been doing training and technical assistance for the last 5 years, and consider myself very, very blessed that I've been able to help our people basically the majority of my career. So I hope you guys learned something. Thank you for putting up with me all week long. You can never learn all of NAHASDA in 1 week. I'm still learning. They're always changing some of the rules or giving you more guidance. So please, if you walk away with nothing, know to check Code Talk and get on there and pull down the NAHASDA statute, pull down those regs, the program guidances, the PIH notices, and learn why you have to do things the way that you have to do, and hopefully provide you guidance when you do that. Okay. So again, these are all of those materials. I think we've referenced every one of them over the last 4 days. So they're very, very helpful. We're going to finish up with the rest of financial management. We're going to talk about the conflict of interest requirements that HUD's imposed, your record keeping, your reporting, and then your maintenance. Your maintenance, like I said, is one of your biggest expenditures within your housing entity. So that's what we're going to finish up with. Our course objectives to provide a summary of the NAHASDA programs are our rules and key elements, answer common questions. We're going to still walk through that process from formula to reporting. It's the section we're kind of in now, and discuss those key issues in implementing your block grant. So to continue financial management, program income. There is a notice regarding that was published in 2022-28. It is also talked about in the NAHASDA regulations at 1062. Program income is defined as any income that you realize or your entity realizes from the disbursement of our NAHASDA grant amounts. It does not include non-program income defined as a portion of the income realized from the operation of 1937 housing units. It does not count the proceeds from the 1937 Housing Act mutual help units, your proceeds of sale. If you collect developer fees associated with the development of low-income housing tax credits, that would not be considered, you would count that as program income. Your interest earned off your P&A reserve accounts, and any other amounts as defined within that Public and Indian Housing Notice 2022-28. Okay, so conflict of interest in admissions and the administration of contracts. We started back talking, I think on day one, when in your application process, I asked if you guys, have your applicants disclose any relationships with your decision makers, with your housing staff, your board of commissioners, and your tribal council. Okay, it comes down to this and this ruling. So a conflict of interest is the same. Basically, they're going to use the same definition when we're talking about the administration of your contracts and when you're talking about the admissions into your housing programs. When somebody has a position of trust, has a competing professional and personal interest, okay? When someone makes a decision in an official capacity and they stand to profit personally. When your interests have the potential to conflict with the best interest of your organization or those who you represent, okay? Now, a conflict of interest and a perceived conflict of interest can be just as dangerous, okay? When I work with the Board of Commissioners and their decision-making capacities and tribal council, we have those discussions. You have to know about recusal in certain situations when you're dealing with your family. Recusal does not mean pushing back from the boardroom table and not saying anything or touching anything. Recusal means leaving the room, it being noted in your board meeting minutes, and you not having access to those meeting minutes that reflect that portion, okay? Because conflict of interest actually goes out not only to your family members, but your business associates or somebody looking to employ somebody within your family. It's very, very far reaching in HUD's definition, okay? The requirements is to report a potential conflict of interest. So it can just be that perceived conflict of interest to your area ONAP office. Disclose to the public the conflict of interest, the nature of the assistance that you're going to provide to the individual, and the specific basis for which there is no conflict. So when it comes to admissions, one of the things I would put on there is they were the next eligible participant on the list. That's the basis that there is no conflict. Just because they're related to somebody doesn't make them ineligible. It just puts you under scrutiny, basically. So I'm so old that I was around on the national level when this came about, okay? So NAHASDA went into place in 1996. Congress wanted to know how NAHASDA was doing, for one thing, okay? So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Office of the Inspector General, the IG, they basically published a report. They went out, they did an audit. They went to a wide variety of our housing entities across the United States. They tried our large land-based tribes, our smaller tribes, our rancherias, our pueblos, our villages up in Alaska. They wanted a wide sampling, okay? And they wanted to know how NAHASDA was doing. So the finding number 6 of that audit found, in part, among the housing entities they reviewed, there were undisclosed conflicts of interest and preferential treatment in the admission to our housing programs. Over half of the housing entities audited had no process to ensure adherence to our conflict of interest requirements. Or could they prove that the admissions were made to eligible families and that all members of the tribe were treated fairly? Okay. You can see your problems there all over and the resulting rules which we follow. Throughout the week, remember I said HUD wants to make sure you are treating all your tribal members fairly and the same. There it is, right there. Admission made to eligible families. Now we have a rule, you have to keep all the admission documents that they were eligible for admission at the time you admitted them to the program forever. Even if they're there for 20 years, it's got to be in that current file. It all kind of comes back to this, okay? Oops. So this is the program guidance. It's 2002-13. It is in your reference materials, okay? And it speaks to the application of the requirements. The conflict of interest provisions apply to anybody who participates in our block grant recipients' decision-making process. Anybody who could gain inside information with regards to our assisted activities. So that stretches out into our contracts and our procurement and our things like that. Such individuals would be, but are not necessarily limited to, your housing staff, your tribal board members, their immediate families, and such individuals' business associates. So it's a big net. I mean, it includes a lot of people. The requirements prohibit any such individual from benefiting from their position personally, financially, or through the receipt of a special benefit other than the payment of their salary and or appropriate administrative expenses. It doesn't prevent housing staff, your board members, their family members, their business associates from receiving housing benefits for which they qualify if they're a low-income individual. In order to comply with the conflict of interest requirements, recipients should have in place a set of procedures for determining when a conflict of interest exists and for reporting the conflict to HUD, disclosing it to the public as required by the regulations, and those procedures should include a method for determining whether or not there is a potential conflict of interest with the applicant. Does your housing application ask the applicants to disclose any personal, family, or business relationship? Okay, that's why that piece of paper I showed you should be in every type of application package, not just admissions, okay? The conflict of interest could exist if you bump somebody up on a rehab or a down payment assistance list, okay? So does the housing entity maintain a list of persons having immediate family or business ties with their decision makers? Now, I argued that point. I'll be honest with you. I said that could become a full-time job in some of our areas. The other area I argued was the definition of immediate family. Okay, so you determine in your policies what immediate family is. Okay, I would suggest that you don't use, and this was a suggestion I made at that time, that you don't use a first cousin, just because of how many first cousins I had by the time I was 12. You know, that could be 3/4 of our tribe. So they wouldn't all be first cousins, but you know what I mean. So it becomes rather difficult to track all of those. So you need administrative steps for reporting of potential conflict of interest to our EWONAP office, disclosing to the public the conflict of interest, the nature of the assistance you're going to provide that individual, and the specific basis for which that selection of the individual was made. Okay. So you need to make sure you have written and adopted policies required by NAHASDA for eligibility, selection, admission, occupancy, rents charged, management, maintenance, and conflict of interest. Okay. Those policies have to be in accordance with NAHASDA. The program regulations enforced by a set of procedures. So you should have a conflict of interest procedure in place. Okay. That ensure the policies are being adhered to in both the actions of your staff and your decisions of your tribal council and your board of commissioners. Okay, it stretches all the way up. So they should be reviewed to ensure they do not contain provisions that inherently allow for a conflict of interest. If your housing entity does not have those necessary policies, systems, and control procedures to comply with NAHASDA, you should actually write them and adopt them immediately. All policies are supposed to be made public. Copies should be made available to the public upon request. So if your person, that your applicant receiving assistance is low income, they qualify for eligibility, admission, and occupancy, only a public disclosure and HUD notification is required. You can read more about that at 1030. However, HUD approval for an exemption is required when there's a potential conflict of interest that would be in violation of 1030. An example of a situation requiring HUD approval for an exemption to the conflict of interest provision would be housing assistance to a board member whose income is between 80 and 100% of median income. Okay, so if you have and utilize that 10% authority because of the fact of who they are in that governing position, you need to let HUD know. This is a protection mechanism for us. So you don't have a tribal chairman saying, you know, I don't care where my sister-in-law is on the list, get her out of my house. You could say, yes, sir, but I need to let you know that I have to make a public posting to the public for a series of 7 days. I need to notify our HUD office, but I would be glad to do that. Could you put that in writing for me? Okay. Always, if there's something that you think is wrong, okay, or you're asking for an exception to any policy, any procedure, get it in writing, okay? Make a copy of that. Don't just leave it on a computer and hope that you can find it when you need it 5 years later. You should have a file for things like that, okay? Just to protect yourselves. Because the person that might have given you permission might not be there in the future when you need that proof, okay? So, because of the fact that this is an oversight position, a board member, and they're within that special class of 80 to 100%, you have to seek that permission. So your compliance with your conflict of interest requirements should be included in the tribe and or TDHE's self-monitoring program also. Okay, so when you do your self-monitoring, you should be looking at the applications and seeing if the applicants are related to anybody. HUD's going to review your conflict of interest policies, your procedures, and your performance during their regular monitoring of a recipient compliance with the program requirements. So low-income individuals to who that conflict of interest provision would normally apply, okay, housing staff, board members, if they qualify for that assistance under your policies for eligibility and admissions, they don't fall under the category of an exception, and ONAP approval is not required to provide them with assistance. Okay, again, go to 1030 to read about that. However, you still need to make what they call a public disclosure of the nature of the assistance to be provided to such individual, the specific basis for their selection. That's why I say on that last line there, I put, they were income eligible and next on the list. The recipient must also provide your area ONAP with a copy of your disclosure that proved you did that before the assistance is provided to the person. Okay, so in this case, you get to the point that you're picking the next person on the list. Okay, one of the things I always do, I always pick two, a top one and a second one, just in case the first one doesn't want it. I did that even during hiring. Makes it easier than reconvening everybody. Okay, this is our top pick. If something should happen, the second person will be, you notify them when you start getting the house ready right off the bat, because you've got to go through that 7-day period and you have to get a hold of HUD. Okay, that way they can immediately move in. All your T's are, crossed and your I's are dotted at the point that your unit is ready. You don't wait until all of that's done and then say, oh, I've got to, put this up for 7 days and let the HUD office know. Okay, so it is to ensure fair and equitable treatment to all, determine if a conflict exists, disclose to the public, report to HUD prior to providing assistance. HUD can make an exception if need be. If the family is low income, they qualify. It's not a conflict, but you still need to make that disclosure because of the relationship. If the conflict is only apparent or perceived, make the disclosure and inform HUD. Several ways to make your public disclosure. One such way is make the information available in the same manner that you would provide any other public information, maybe how you post your APR, posting it in a prominent place. Some programs include a public disclosure section on their monthly meeting agenda. HUD must be provided with a copy of the disclosure. If the recipient is a TDHE, the disclosure may be provided to the tribe as well. So, your application for all of your programs should have similar language. Do you or a member of your family or household have a family or business relationship with an employee of the housing entity, the Board of Commissioners, or the Tribal Council? Oh, sorry. That is a disclosure of conflict of interest statement. I think I shared that with you earlier in the week. That should be in all of your packages. The applicant's name, the name of the program they're applying for, their application date. I am applying for this housing entity program noted above. I'm disclosing that I'm an employee, I'm a Board of Commissioner, or I'm a Tribal Council member. I'm an immediate family member to an employee, a Board of Commissioner, or a Tribal Council member. I'm a business partner of an employee, a Board of Commissioner, or a Tribal Council member. I am neither to all of the above. If you are a family member or a business partner of a housing employee, Board of Commissioner, or Tribal Council, please state their name and your relationship to them. Your name and your relationship slot, and then the acknowledgement. I understand that a public disclosure of my selection will be made. A copy of the disclosure shall be submitted to HUD. I have been notified of my opportunity to receive a copy of the conflict of interest policy and to receive additional information from the housing entity. I understand that this disclosure does not disqualify and or determine my application ineligible. Okay, so that should be in every type of application package that you offer. Rehab, down payment, rental assistance, home ownership, TBRA. So do you ask in your program application packets if the applicants are related to your decision makers? Yes, no, or you don't know. A, B, C, or D. Okay. Anybody answering me there? One person. Come on, give me some answers. Yes, no, or you don't know. Otherwise, we're going to be late. No, I'm teasing. Come on. Nobody's going to answer me except for Tasha? There we go. Thank you. Okay, so this is a sample procedure for determination of conflict of interest in admissions. Okay. Sample public disclosure form. So when you pull down, if you don't have these, when you pull down the conflict of interest notice, because it goes back so far, you're going to have to alter the PDF for the dates and things like that. But it's got a sample disclosure in there. Okay. Please be advised, all public comments must be postmarked within 7 calendar days of the initial date of this posting as indicated below. All conflict of interest comments must be in a sealed envelope addressed to the housing entity. Conflict of interest comments with your address. Comments that are received will be reviewed at the next scheduled board meeting. The board will not consider any comments received after the end of the comment period, and that date should be exactly 7 days from the time that you put it up. You put it up at 8 o'clock, make it 7 days at 8:05, and make sure whoever is doing this does not take that stuff down until that time is expired. They need to sign it, they need to date it, and put the timestamp in there. Okay. So the first part of it would show you that too. They've applied for and determined eligible for services. The nature and basis of the assistance is they're going to get rental assistance. They were selected for a rental unit. Okay. So this is the one that you'll see in the packet. And the specific basis for the selection, well, they're American Indian or Alaska Native, low income as described by HUD. It's going to be their primary residence, and they were the next eligible applicant on the list. That's what I usually put on that line. Okay, and then there's your posting, what day you put it up, what day you put it down. So if you want to use this one, you're going to have to alter it. The one in the packet. Okay, but you should be doing that. I'm having a hard time with my buttons. So our next question is, do you post your notice of potential conflict of interest in your housing office when required? So I came home, I was out of town testifying, and they had went through all the proper procedures, but they had put one of the children of one of our staff members in the house. And I'm like, you got to make sure other people are at that table also when you do things like that. What could trigger something. You don't want half the res, she only got in there because that was his son, her son, or his son, or whatever the reason being. You cover your 6 for that. Okay. Bring in a board member, bring in a council member, something like that when you're going through the selection, and say, he's next on the list, just so you can cut that. So, yep, you definitely file them and keep that for your records. Okay, legally, you only have to keep things like this for 3 years. Now, if I have to keep proof of eligibility for the rest of their life, this is my thinking. And I have to go through these steps because it's a conflict of interest somehow. Okay, I'm going to take that next step, Bella. I'm going to take the next step, and I'm going to keep the proof that I posted that right with those documents. I don't want HUD to get there, and they might not come for 6 years. Okay, if I keep it for the 3 years and then toss it, well, yeah, I did do that. I did make the posting, but the 3 years expired, so I got rid of it. I don't want that to happen. Okay, so that's what I would do. So Danica, you're exactly right there. Nina answered me. Nobody else did. Yes, no, I don't know. Come on, guys. Okay. What's HUD going to check when they come and they do their monitoring? Do you have proof that the family was selected in accordance with your written policies and procedures and their position on the wait list? If there's a conflict of interest involving a family at admission. If so, has HUD been notified? If so, had that public disclosure been made as required? The other thing I used to do is I had self-addressed stamped envelopes with those little hole punches in them. You know, those things that you do, those little binder things that you put on there so the hole doesn't rip, and a cup hook. So whenever I would put the posting, I'd put those right on there also. Nobody ever sent them in, but it was there. Take them down, put them up. So what requirements regarding conflict of interest are applicable? Okay, this is under 2 CFR 318. So the reason you're seeing 200, that tells you now we're going to talk about conflict of interest to do with money. So it probably has to do with your contracts. So 318 governs the procurement of your supplies, your equipment, other property, construction, and services by recipients and subrecipients. Okay, when it gets to admission, all those other cases, it's 1030, 32, 34, and 36 govern those. Their program guidance is at 2002-13. It's really old. You would think that they would redo that, but they have not yet. But they're busy. Okay. Why am I skipping? So applicability in the procurement of supplies, equipment, procurement, construction, services by recipients and subrecipients, your conflict of provisions, conflict of interest provisions are at 318 and they shall apply. Anything not governed by 318, the following provisions shall apply. Here we go. No person who participates in the decision-making process who gains inside information with regard to NAHASDA-assisted activities can obtain a personal or financial interest or benefit from those activities, except for the use of NAHASDA funds to pay salaries, related admin costs. Such persons include anybody with an interest in a contract, subcontract, or agreement, or proceeds thereunder, either for themselves or others with whom they have a business or immediate family tie. Immediate family ties are determined by the tribe or TDHE in your operating policies. So it should probably be in your personnel policies, definitely in your procurement policies, definitely in your conflict of interest policies. So when you go to rewrite those, make sure you have those in there. Like I said, I would recommend you don't put cousin in there. It's a really long definition when you do use it. There's a lot of people. Keep skipping 2 slides at a time. Okay, your conflict of interest provision does not apply to instances where a person who might otherwise be included under your conflict provision is low income and they're selected in accordance with the recipient's written policies for A&O. For families, for housing assisted with block grant funds, provided that there is no conflict of interest under your applicable tribal or state law, you as a recipient must make a public disclosure of the nature of assistance to be provided, the specific basis for the selection of the person. The recipient shall provide the appropriate area ONAP with a copy of the disclosure before the assistance is provided to the person. So grantees and subgrantees will maintain a written code of standards of conduct governing the performance of your employees engaged in the award, administration of contracts. No employee, officer, or agent shall participate in the selection or in the award of an administration of a contract supported by federal funds if a conflict of interest, real or apparent, would be involved. Okay, so they can say all day long that there is no conflict. if it is a perceived conflict, it is just as bad in HUD's eyes. Okay. So you need to make sure your Board of Commissioners understand this. So when I work with Tribal Council, I always ask them if they would give the lessons basically on recusal to the board members when they appoint them to the committee, because of the fact that it kind of puts your ED in a bad position, because, you know, your Board of Commissioners are basically your board of oversight, and you're telling them what they can and cannot do. And sometimes they don't take that too nicely. It kind of helps them out. So I always try to get the Tribal Council to step up and do that. Okay. Conflicts arise when an employee, officer, or agent, any member of his or her immediate family, partner of a firm who employs or is about to employ any of the above parties, has a financial interest in or personal benefit from a firm considered for a contract. Okay. So if one of your board members' son works in a painting organization and you're going to put out a bid for paint or painting, you know, supplies and things like that, they shouldn't probably be privy to those conversations. Officers, employees of and agents of a recipient can neither solicit nor accept gratuities, favors, or anything of monetary value from any party to anything or person that you contract with. Okay, you have to be really careful there. Now, I made a mistake. There's limits usually when you get into some of my other trainings about the amount that you can legally, you know, accept from different people. Okay, you'll have those provisions within your tribe also. I had somebody that sold building supplies. Okay, so my reservation is good 3 hours from a Home Depot or a Lowe's or anything, you know, such as that, large box stores. So they're smaller ones, you know, 20 miles, 30 miles in different directions away. That's who we procure a lot of our materials from. So one of them came in and he says, Cheryl, I got some shirts here. Can I give them to your crew? Maintenance crew, painters, all of them. And I'm like, yeah, that'll save their clothes or whatever. And I'm looking at it. It's worth what, about $5? That's not going to break any rule. I actually picked it up and looked at it. It's advertising his firm, of course, on the back. Okay. And it didn't hit me until weeks later. I was writing an RFP and I looked up and one of my guys went by. He was watering the lawn after he mowed it. He's moving a sprinkler and he's advertising this firm. And then I looked down to the RFP I'm doing, and it is for something that particular organization was probably going to be bidding on. And I thought, okay, if I came in to put a bid in at the housing authority and I see the housing staff advertising my competition, you know, that was a big mistake. I mean, it was a product that was only probably worth $5 in bulk, but that was a mistake I made as a director because that was a conflict of interest. I was basically advertising for one of my contractors. Okay, so things that you don't think all the way through could be perceived as a conflict of interest. And that was one mistake that was all on me, you know, didn't realize it, but you have to think of that also. So, you know, you can neither solicit nor accept gratuities. So there's usually, you know, they'll say things of $20, $25, $50, $75. I've seen them up to $100 in some places. That t-shirt didn't even break any of those, but it was what it said, you know, that helped cause that. So you must maintain written standards of conduct, okay, covering conflict of interest and governing the awards of staff involved in the selection, award, and administration of contracts. No person can participate in the selection, award, or administration of a contract if they have a real or apparent conflict of interest. You have to set standards for situations in which the gift is insignificant or, nominal value. Standards of conduct have to include disciplinary actions for violations, okay? Make sure your policies do. Disciplinary actions for violations, okay? They're going to look for that. It's the responsibility of the person with the conflict of interest to disclose the conflict and remove themselves from that process. So this is the conflict of interest, and a code of conduct talks about gifts, gratuities, use of confidential information, and violations. So the housing entity prohibits its officers, employees, and agents from participating directly or indirectly in the selection or the award of administration of any contract if a conflict, real or apparent, would be involved. Such conflict would arise when a financial or other interest in a firm is selected for award is held by an officer, an employee, or an agent involved in making the award. This is when the definition of immediate family comes in, and it's huge. His or her relative, including father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, husband, wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepson, stepdaughter, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, and half-sister. That's who you got to keep track of. And that's not even including a cousin. That's why I said I wouldn't suggest you put that in there. A lot of times when they say, well, what should we put in there? I used to make the recommendation, anybody that your tribe would give a 4-day paid funeral leave to, that's immediate family. It also stretches out to his or her partner or that organization which employs, is negotiating to employ, or has an arrangement considering prospective employment of any of the above. Okay, that's a lot. So, gift, gratuities, use of confidential information. The housing entity prohibits its officers, employees, and agents from soliciting or accepting gratuities, favors, anything of monetary value, other than unsolicited items of nominal intrinsic value from contractors, potential contractors, parties to subcontracts, and the knowing use of confidential information for actual or anticipated personal gain. Okay, this is the written part. This was mine. Remember, you have to have it, what you're going to do for a violation in writing. Okay, so this is what I used. Disciplinary action will be taken to remedy violations of this code. May include verbal or written warning, formal reprimand, suspension, or dismissal. The level of that disciplinary action will depend on the severity of the violation, the individual's prior behavior, the nature of the individual's position. Notice that the housing entity communicates the requirements of this code during orientation, at trainings, in the bylaws of the Board of Commissioners, and its personnel and procurement policies. Okay, so make sure that you've got that disciplinary action in writing, because they'll look for that. Under 1032, may exceptions be made to the conflict of interest provisions? Yes, HUD can make an exception of the conflict of interest provisions set forth at 1030 on a case-by-case basis when it determines that such an exception would further the primary objective of NAHASDA and the effective and efficient implementation of your recipient program, activity, or project. A public disclosure of the conflict of interest needs to be made. A determination that that exception would not violate tribal laws on conflict of interest or any applicable state laws must also be made. In determining whether to make an exception to the conflict of interest provisions, HUD's going to consider whether any type of undue hardship would result either to the recipient or the person affected when weighed against the public interest served by avoiding that prohibited conflict. A recipient must maintain or retain all such records for a period of at least 3 years after an exception is made. Okay. Oops, sorry. So a 1-year prohibition used to be under, when we were housing authorities, a required document years ago. A lot of our housing entities still do that. Okay. It's a prohibition for any staff member, board member, tribal council member of selling anything or doing anything with the housing entity for 1 year after they leave their position. Okay. Just so you can be assured that they weren't privy to any confidential information and they profit from it. Okay. We also have to check for debarred contractors when we get into contracting. Okay. You need to prove that you did this. So take screenshots and print them when you're checking your vendors. You have to make sure the prohibitions of the use of a debarred or a suspended or ineligible contractors. You can read about that at 1044. In addition to tribal requirements, the prohibition in 2 CFR Part 2424 on the use of debarred, suspended, or ineligible contractors apply. So SAM is our system for award management. Okay, it's a federal government owned and operated free website that consolidates the capabilities in a general contractor registration, CCR Fed Reg, online representation, certifications, ORCA, and the excluded parties list system, EPLS, and that's what we utilize. That's where you're going to go to check to see if your contractors, the people that you do business with, are suspended or debarred. And like I said, they'd like a screenshot to prove that. So you can read about that at 1044, prohibitions on debarred, suspended, and ineligible contractors. You have to check your contractors, your subs, the lower tier subcontractors or contractors, and any subrecipients to make sure that they are not debarred. So 24 CFR Part 24, the prohibitions on debarred, suspended, and ineligible contractors. A debarment is an exclusion from participation in all federally funded programs for a reasonable specified period of time commensurate with the seriousness of the violation or a failure to perform on other contracts. Such action is taken pending the elimination of circumstances for which that debarment was imposed. Debarment can be imposed for a violation of any contract clause, including equal opportunity, employment opportunity provisions, acceptance of contingent fees, any of the Secretary of Labor regulations, such as Davis-Bacon, or other serious contract violations. The Secretary of Labor may independently of HUD debar a firm based on violations in labor standards. And I have seen this take place. Okay. So you have to make sure that when you're bidding something out, you check all of those, the people that you're receiving bids from also. And when you do business with them, companies, contractors out there, electricians, and things like that. So a suspension means a disqualification from all federally assisted programs for a temporary period of time because adequate evidence that the firm engaged in a criminal, fraudulent, or seriously improper conduct. A contractor is suspended pending investigation and appropriate action by the federal government. All suspensions are for temporary periods, pending the completion of an investigation and such legal proceedings as may ensue. Your exclusions area within the Performance Information Functional Area of SAM, which is the System for Awards Management, used to be called the Excluded Parties List System, EPLS, identifies parties excluded from receiving federal contracts, certain subcontracts, any certain type of federal financial and non-financial assistance benefits. As exclusion records are publicly available, SAM keeps our user community aware of administrative and statutory exclusions across the entire government and individuals barred from entering the United States. The more commonly used term, suspensions and debarments, reflect exclusions. Okay, so I have a number, an identifying number, because I work with government contracts. So they have to check that every time that they give me a contract to go out and help one of your housing entities. Okay. That's what the purpose is, to make sure that I didn't do anything, to make sure that one of the contractors I used was paying Davis-Bacon, things like that. Because the Department of Labor will reach out and suspend them or debar them. So usually suspend them first and then debar them if they can get prove that they did that. So you are responsible to check with the people that you buy from and work with that they're not excluded from that. It's just, some of the procurement duties that you have. One of those other things that you have to remember. Okay. How can I check to see whether an entity is excluded from receiving a federal award? The following information is actually taken from the SAM Exclusions Extract User Guide. Use the following steps to see if any entity is subject to any active exclusion, suspensions, debarments imposed by a federal agency. You go to sam.gov. On the Homes page or Search Records tab, type the entity's name or their DUNS number in the search bar and click the search icon. Important note, individuals are not assigned DUNS numbers. If you're checking for an exclusion for an individual, you search by typing in their name. If no exclusion record is found for the entity does not have an active exclusion submitted in SAM by a federal agency. If an exclusion record is found, it's going to display in a box marked exclusion in purple. Check the status in the top right corner of the box. If the status indicates active, there is an active exclusion for that entity. Okay. You can actually YouTube how to do this. So many people have to do it. Please note, just seeing that an entity has an active exclusion is not sufficient. As an awarding official, you have to continue to the next steps. If you're viewing an exclusion record as indicated in the purple box, marked exclusion in the upper left corner, in the search result, click View Details to open the exclusion record and see additional information. If you're viewing an entity management record as indicated by a green box marked Entity in the upper left corner, click View Details to view the entity's dashboard for more information. Use the navigation links on the left side of the screen to review the entity's specific exclusion. Click on the Active Exclusions link to view all current exclusions. Click on the View Exclusion to view the the data in the specific exclusion record. Scroll through the exclusion record to review the details. For more information, refer to the System for Award Management, SAM, at www.sam.gov. Also, like I said, you can go to YouTube and there's videos available there. But somebody is supposed to be doing that within your organization. Okay, so record keeping and reporting, our next section. If I'd quit skipping slides. Accounting records. Okay, so your good records and your procedures allow you to control your cash flow, monitor your program performance, and establish fiscal control. The requirements in subpart F of the regulations, you have to maintain your records for a minimum of 3 years after the end of the program year that your funds were expended. If you have any type of audit involvement, if you have any other protest of any sort, anything like that, you have to keep it for a little bit longer. Okay. So what records to keep? General administrative related to the administration of your program, IHPs, agreements, policies, all your APRs, organizational documents. Always keep all of your contracts, anything like that. Okay, anything procurement related. So financial paperwork to meet your audit requirements, such as your procurement documents, your contracts, your audits, your budgets, other documents required by your other federal programs and funding sources. Project specific should include project eligibility, participant eligibility, anything with your environmentals, keep it forever. Procurement, keep that. Monitoring, you're going to keep that. You're going to want to, anytime you have an audit, you're going to want to review, and, you know, HUD monitoring, you're going to want to review how you scored, how you did the last time it happened, to make sure that you're not making the same mistakes. So you always keep all of that also. Written procedures for identifying documentation required for a tenant, your programmatic files, and the ways in which files are to be reviewed and stored. Okay. So the monitoring, they're going to review your current year and 2 prior years. Okay. Unless your sampling reveals non-compliance. Okay. When it gets to your inspections, they're going to go in and physically go into a couple of your units. The inspection, they're going to do the greater of 10 dwelling units or 10% of all your units. Same thing for your client files. The greater of 10 files or 10% of all your files. So if you, because you're the housing expert for the tribe, should operate a different program, keep your files in a different room so they are not subject to that audit, okay? Because they're going to count your total files. Your self-monitoring mutual agreements, that's another document that you can execute. So your procurement, you need your statement of work and your work write-ups, your independent cost estimates, your evidence of publication or solicitation for Indian preference. You keep all of that. Your solicitation mailing list, you're supposed to keep that updated. Your technical evaluation plan for your request for proposals, your competitive proposals only. Your solicitation, any type of amendments, your approvals, your bids, your proposals. Your procurement files are very, very important, okay? Your files as a whole are very, very important. Your information has to be retrievable, okay? So make sure that you do that. Technical evaluations for your request for proposal, your cost, your price analysis, your competitive range determinations, your negotiation objectives for a competitive proposal, a memorandum of your negotiations, your selection decisions for a competitive proposal. Why did we pick this firm? Your bid tabulations, your documentation regarding debarred and suspended list of contractors. Here's a screenshot showing I checked all these guys, you know. Your award documentation, your notice to proceed, and your letters to unsuccessful bidders. Same thing for when you have an applicant for housing who you deem, you know, ineligible, or they fail a criminal background. Your bidders also, you have a period of time which should be laid out within your policies, a period of time to contact them and to tell them, I'm sorry, you are an unsuccessful bidder. We welcome you to bid on our next project. You know, you can have a blanket letter that you use over and over, make that up. But you have to make sure that that takes place in a timely manner. Your procurement files should also include your bond and all your insurance certificates, your records of your pre-bid proposals and post-award conferences that you hold, contract modifications, supporting documents, your cost price analysis, your request for payments, your supporting inspection reports, your lien waivers, your final inspections, and your completion certificates. There we go. So in your reference materials, I believe there is a sample contract file arrangement. You're only as good as your files. This is one that you use for procurement. Your contract bid folders, your award folders, your specification folders, your contract registers, your change orders. I think it's a 10 or a 12 file arrangement, okay? For procurement, GSA federal supply sources available. That guidance is 2010-09. We are eligible. We can utilize GSA as well as your tribe, but a housing entity is eligible to do that. We are designated as an executive agency. We have access to sources to supply on the same basis of an employee of an executive agency. And when are your funds obligated? Your performance vendors under your block grant obligation, the document goes all the way back to 2000. You can get it on Code Talk. At the time of a written commitment, subrecipient funds count when work begins. Construction costs are obligated when force account workers break ground or your construction contract is signed. Okay, performance measures and your audit. Yes. The measures under 1524, your fiscal audits have been conducted in a timely basis in accordance with the requirements of a single audit act as applicable. Any deficiencies identified within your audit reports have been addressed within the prescribed time period, that you've complied with the required certifications in your IHP. Okay, remember you're certifying to all these things. They're going to check them. And all policies have been made available to the public. So you have your own file, your depository of all your approved policies with proof of adoption, and then you should have a duplicate one available to the public. They have the right to the conflict of interest, to your A&O policies, to, actually any policy that you have, they have the ability to request that, and you are supposed to supply it. Accurate annual performance reports were submitted to HUD in accordance with 1514, including making them available to the public. You've met your IHP planned activities in your 1 year. That's why when I go back to the day that we talked about the IHP, if you see something in your IHP that you are not hitting your goal for, or you're not doing that activity for, and it's been in a couple of them, take it out. You can always add it. You can amend your IHP at any time. You kind of get graded on that, on the APR portion, and I see that happen over and over. Your recipient has substantially complied with the requirements of 24 CFR Part 1000, which is a huge document, and all the other applicable federal statutes and regulations that we have to adhere to. You learned over the last couple of days, there's a lot of them. Okay. So the requirements under 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart F, your single audit consolidates and allows for one audit rather than multiple audit of each federal grant a tribe receives. Okay. If you spend $750,000 or more in federal funds within your fiscal year, you have to have a single audit. So you might not get a $750,000 block grant, but if you've got COVID money, you've got treasury money, you're spending money from a prior year that brings you up to that threshold, well, guess what? You better get a single audit that particular year. Okay. So the provisions of Subpart F for 2 CFR 200, we'll talk about that. You conduct in accordance with 200-514 scope of audit. So you procure an audit. There is a requirement that's fairly new. When you advertise for your auditor, they want a peer review to be requested. Okay. Non-submission of a failed peer review can disqualify your auditor from consideration. So HUD's going to look at that when they come in. Okay, be prepared to provide all the items your auditor asks for and give them access to all of your records. Your CFDA, your award numbers, prepare your financial statements, your schedules, your schedule of expenditures of your federal awards, your CFA. Be timely, complete your audit, submit it to It doesn't go to HUD. It goes to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse on time, okay? The earlier of, and I've seen findings for this, whichever happens first is what you're supposed to do here. 30 days after the receipt of your auditor's report, or 9 months after the end of the audit period, okay? Whichever happens first is what you're supposed to adhere to there. Okay. Allowable audit cost. You can utilize your NAHASDA funds to pay for a proportional share of the cost of the audit if an audit is required, okay? If you're a housing audit, you're a housing audit. If you're a housing entity and the audit is just for you, you can pay for the whole thing, okay? If you're a component of the tribe, you're a department, you can't pay for the whole tribe's audit. You can pay for the portion related to the auditing of the housing entity, okay? I'm sorry, I keep getting clicking more than one at a time. So insurance, remember, mayhem is everywhere. These are the requirements that I was telling you about. So this guidance goes all the way back to 2014-03. It kind of goes hand in hand with useful life. Okay, we have slippage here. And it's going to get worse. I've discussed this with a couple of HUD offices. You're getting into places like California and Florida, and it's getting hard to get insurance, okay? But our requirements require us to get that from our tenants and proof, okay? That guidance provides technical assistance to assist recipients in understanding and addressing their insurance needs. When it's required, what insurance requirements apply, when is insurance adequate, what insurance requirements apply to your contractors and your subcontractors, what other insurance requirements are under NAHASDA, okay? Bottom line, any actual loss that could have been covered by a permissible insurance. So if you could have covered that item under insurance that was allowable under NAHASDA, they're not going to let you pay for that if it was insured to replace it. It would be generally unallowable, okay? That loss. Any actual loss that could have been covered by a permissible insurance are generally unallowable. So when is insurance required? When a recipient has housing units that are owned and operated or assisted with block grant funds. IHB assistance of $5,000 or more. And this is where our slippage is. When we assist somebody with $5,000 or more and don't make sure that this insurance is in place. Insurance may not be required if there is no risk of loss or exposure, or if the amount of assistance is less than $5,000 and there is a no repayment agreement of any kind, okay? The caveat there is the useful life requires that repayment, okay, at $5,000. So it's basically going to happen. So what is adequate insurance? Insurance in an amount that will protect the financial stability of the recipient's block grant program, whichever is longer. The useful life or affordability period of the recipient or privately owned unit, or the terms of the repayment of forgiveness of that agreement for all or a part of that IHBG assistance for a privately owned housing unit. Under 200-310, at a minimum, provide and maintain equivalent insurance coverage for real property, equipment acquired, improved with federal funds as provided to property owned by the non-federal entity. The block grant specific requirements at 136 mandates adequate insurance. Refer to that program guidance 2014-03, which is in your reference materials, dated March 20th to 2014. Insurance requirements under the block grant program. You can read, again, you're going to go back to some of these things I showed you for self-monitoring under your financial and fiscal management monitoring plans. Purpose of the review is to is to determine if the recipient has adequate insurance to indemnify the recipient against loss from fire, weather, liability claims for all housing units owned, operated by the recipient, and will protect the financial stability of the block grant program. The purpose is to determine whether the recipient uses the insurance proceeds for eligible activities and appropriately reduces the grant expenditures for the insurance proceeds. And then it talks about insurance, procurement, required insurance, things like that. So go through here and look at this portion. It's going to ask for documentation. They're going to want copies of the existence of all your documents also. And they're going to want a summary. So make sure that you've got all of that in place. It is legal for you to purchase insurance on behalf of your recipients, okay, to meet these requirements. But remember, if you do that, you've opened Pandora's box. And then the next thing is, remember, you're supposed to treat all of your tenants and your tribal members the same. So if you're going to provide insurance for one, are you going to provide it for all of them? And how much is that going to cost your block grant? You always have to keep that in the back of your mind. Okay. If you have questions about it, call your HUD office, and ask them, am I supposed to be getting insurance? My question was, what happens if they can't get it? I've been in places where they're doing rehab where I don't think those participants are going to be able to get insurance. In this day and age right now, depending on what state you're in, it's getting tough. So those are things that we have to make sure that we, acknowledge and try to address. So your maintenance, okay, what is it? The definition of maintenance is to keep in an existing state. You preserve, from failure or decline. It is required with your current assisted stock, okay? Got to definitely maintain those particular units, but you should be maintaining all of your NAHASDA units. Maintain your owned and managed units. Allocate funds to provide for that continued maintenance, that efficient operations for all of your housing inventory. Identify the manner in which inventory is going to be protected and maintained. The benefits of a good maintenance plan, it's going to attract new tenants. Manages your time well. It's proactive. It reduces cost. It facilitates tenant satisfaction and retention. It supports sale or releasing, and it controls risk. If you are in your properties, okay, inventorying them or inspecting them, I should say, and maintaining them, you know all about it. Okay, I had a tenant, but in COVID, we didn't do the inspections the way we should have. There was our research and our inspections kind of took a hit. In this particular case, when they did go out and they started doing, they found a couple of units where the participants were not who was originally on the lease. Okay. I said, if you would have done your research, you would have found that out. Okay. Somebody is not going to bring all of their information for a house that they do not live in. If you would have done your inspections, you would have also discovered that those participants were no longer in that household because they wouldn't have been there to sign the documents. Either one of the two things that you were supposed to be doing would have discovered this much earlier. There's a reason that you do research and you do inspections and you make sure you maintain your property. So I've been to places where they say, well, we don't have to inspect, that's a rent to own property or a mutual help property. It is the housing entity's property until the day it conveys. If they move out 6 months before they're supposed to convey that, you are now responsible for bringing that thing all the way up to new and finding a new participant. Okay. It's going to be a lot easier if you inspected that on a regular basis and you maintain that unit. You can, when you are in control of those units, make those tenants fix those items, okay? Blinds, for instance. We did not allow blankets in our windows because it brings mold. It can cause mold. You need proper ventilation. And they would take a hit. We bought heavy duty ones. We put them in our rentals, things like that. But we would charge them. And if you go by and we saw those blinds out of there, we would schedule an appointment, go in, and unfortunately charge the tenant. Mom has to pay for a set of blinds 2 or 3 times because her children were wrecking them. She's going to watch them a little bit harder when it comes to taking care of those blinds, okay? It's a hard thing that you got to do, but you got to do that to preserve your properties, okay? So the benefits of that good maintenance plan is going to bring forth all of that. You should have a good maintenance manual, written policies and procedures, the delegation of responsibilities, your different types of maintenance. There's not just one type of maintenance, okay? The activity and the task. You outline common problems and solutions. Location of your as-builts, things like that. You need to do that. You don't let your last set of specs ever leave your building. You never let your last blueprint leave your building, okay? Things like that. Forms, reports, work orders. You keep all of those. Scheduling, okay? Preventative maintenance. It's on an annual basis by month. A routine maintenance, it's monthly basis by week. Daily maintenance is usually scheduled for the next day. Budgeting, you gather the data, routine maintenance, non-routine maintenance, what is tenant damage. You don't charge your tenants for wear and tear. You charge them for tenant damage. There's capital improvements, preventative maintenance, environmental upgrades. You itemize what type of maintenance, how much labor, how much supplies, how much contract cost. Always capture the maintenance type, what type of unit you're in, and what type of program they're in. Your SOPs, you develop appropriate checklist and forms, job descriptions, subcontractor list, cost data, tracking mechanisms. We required our maintenance people to live within a certain perimeter, basically, or a distance from our housing entity, because we needed a good response time for frozen and broken pipes and things like that, okay? We had maintenance people on call 24 hours a day. Your purchasing of supplies. You assess your average use and need. You assess the local availability of parts, okay? Keep a supply of your hard-to-get parts. Buy in quantity. Consider the cost of storage. Select quality vendors, quality materials. Follow your procurement policy for guidelines on micro purchasing and the small purchases of supplies. It should be done in accordance with your procurement policies and your procedure. Who has the authority to purchase? Who can sign your purchase orders? Your purchase orders are a contract, okay? Make sure that that all of them can't go and do that. And to what amount are they allowed to purchase? Do they have the ability, your maintenance supervisor, to allow somebody else to do that on his behalf? Okay, so your purchasing limits without approval. Who's allowed to sign your purchase orders? You have competitive bidding based on cost, quality, reputation, timeliness, warranties and guarantees. Your inventory and your storage, okay? We didn't allow anybody but our employees and 1 or 2 tribal, that had a maintenance for the tribe. There was very few people were allowed in our maintenance barns. Your tribal members should not be allowed in there. People should not be allowed to borrow from there. You should have sign-outs for your equipment. You need to know where your equipment is. You need to inventory your equipment on a yearly basis. And boy, is that a nightmare the first time you do it. Your maintenance guys are going to hate that. Then you're going to have to decide what to do with the stuff that you no longer need. Okay. You always, when you try to build, you try to use the same type of window. You try to build big enough, your door frames, for a wheelchair to get through. When we built our shower stalls and things like that, we made it so that they could age in place. There was grab bars or, the backing behind that so we could adhere grab bars if needed later on. Those are just things you do. Clean, organized, safe, label any type of chemical, limit that access, sign out security systems sometimes, use date codes, reconcile that at least on a yearly basis, okay? Your shed, your barn, your building has to be inventoried. Oops, sorry. It's fighting me. Last day. You need to prioritize your work orders in your maintenance policy. Okay, this was ours. You'll prioritize the work orders as follows. Emergency is life-threatening or extreme property damage. Urgent is major inconvenience to the resident or property damage. Routine, resident or housing department request. A vacancy, you're preparing your vacant unit for occupancy. Planned maintenance and seasonal maintenance. And then you have special projects, any type of deferred maintenance that your crews have. They're beautifying your playground areas or things like that. Your work order procedures, your work order issued, received by your maintenance department. Your maintenance supervisor reviews and clears the work order. They assign that work order to appropriate staff and set that schedule. It's completed. It's returned and recorded. You need to note all work is completed, especially if you've charged a prior tenant for that. They're going to go in and they're going to look to see that you actually did replace it. Okay. There was times that I would come in and the stack of work orders would be this thick. And I had a big crew. Explain to me this. Well, then you'd get into it and 3/4 of the work would be done. And it's like, okay. And it basically came down to my supervisor. I love him with all my heart to this day. He wanted to be out in the field with the rest of the workers. Okay. He felt bad when he came in and he wasn't working with them side by side out there sweating in the heat, I said, okay. So I did it when they were all there. And I said, you need to come in here and sign off on all these work orders, figure out what's done, what's not done. I said, because if you can't, one of these guys are going to have to come in and start doing that on your behalf. He kind of dropped his head and I gave him a warning that I was going to do that. But that actually made it easier with him and the rest of his peers. Okay, I have to go in there. You either come in at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. And, at the end of the week, I want that down. Especially before your auditors and your HUD monitoring comes into effect, because they look at that, So your work is completed. So if you charge that tenant for it, you have to show on a different one where you've actually completed and fixed that item that you charged that person for. Okay, because that's what they look for. So your work orders, how are you going to file it? The code. What was the date of issue? What was the date and the time of action? The signature of the issuer? Description of work to be performed or problem to be solved? Description of equipment necessary? What charge? What account are you going to charge? What kind of required craft? Are you going to need a specialty plumber, electrician? What kind of work was actually performed? What materials did you use? How much time did it take to complete that task? They have to track all of that. The date they, time they started it and when they completed it. So then the other problem that I had to come out with was they keep calling us off our jobs. We can't get anything done. So you have to limit the amount of your staff people that can direct your maintenance staff. Okay. And there should be, got to the point where I had a great big old board. This is the priority of the units that I need done also. You just have, it's a learning curve, but you can do it. But, you know, your maintenance guys are the backbone of your place, okay? And they're going to be one of the biggest expenditures. So property inspections, exterior, interior, unit, curb appeal. So you don't do your inspections in a place with snow when there's snow on the ground. You can't see. Now, if it's a move out, you have to, okay? But any other time, you schedule it once your snow's gone. Now, you do not have to do your inspections on the 1 year anniversary of them. They have to be done once a year. You can schedule all your, you know, by project number, by unit type. You can schedule them however you want as long as you get in there. Your move-in inspection, your recipient and tenant, both should be there, you know, must be there. You document the condition of the unit. It acts as a basis for all future inspections. Your move-out inspection is compared to your move-in inspection. Tenant is charged for all damage beyond normal wear and tear. We all have cameras. My guys had iPads. Take pictures and videos to show the unit condition at move-in. It is 3:25. If I had this on a different thing, you would see what time it was. My guys, okay, time to hurry up. My guys, take a picture. This is the date. This is the time. Here, there's a hole in the wall is there. Okay. Don't let them move in until the unit is ready. So they don't, you've opened Pandora's box, first of all, if you have. And you don't want them to do damage. But I've just got a little bit of, no, you can't leave stuff in the unit. You can't move stuff in the unit until you've legally taken possession. Okay. Your documentation and your tenant file, your move-in inspections and subsequent inspections have to be cross-referenced in your tenant files. Repairs needed at move-out must have documentation and evidence that the subject repairs were made before the move-in of your next tenant. Okay. Monthly inspections. If you have a large enough staff, this is what they recommend. Okay. Brand new tenants, you inspect them monthly. The new tenant's home inspected on a monthly basis for their first 3 months, so they know what you expect. If they're compliant, they graduate to a home inspection every 3 months. And then it would go, you know, to that 6-month inspection. After 2 6-months inspection, they go to the annual. It depends on your staffing size, okay? Somebody fails an inspection, definitely put them on a more frequent inspection until they have passed a series of them, okay? I've seen where they can do, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage if they are not inspected. So once that tenant graduates to an annual inspection, they remain on that unless you notice tenant damage or improper housekeeping. If tenant damage or improper housekeeping occurs, place them back on a monthly inspection. Okay? So your maintenance inspections, when you mobilize your maintenance staff for inspections, they should have on hand, like I said, recharged fire extinguishers, smoke alarms, batteries, furnace filters, screens, lock sets, specialty bulbs. More than one of them, usually at least 2 in there, tightening and doing all of this. Then you don't have to bring them in and get permission and go through all that time. Fix the stuff you can. Blinds. Have on staff, you know, all that stuff, have it ready when you know when you're going to do your inspections. Okay, so your move out inspections should be within 24 hours of the tenant move out. It should be compared to your move-in inspection and your prior inspections. Your maintenance department determines those costs for any repairs, tenant damage, wear and tear, upgrades, etc. And your move out should require a 30-day written notice. Conduct the inspections. It should be close to the original condition. You know, you're going to have to repaint. If you have carpets, you're going to have to clean those. The family pays for the damage, but not the wear and tear. So the following document is also mine because I realized that they didn't know what to expect for their move out. So I made one up for them. And this was the move out procedure. And it told them about any property left, what was going to happen with it. It told them how I expected. I wanted you to pull out your appliances, clean behind them, white out your cupboards, clean your refrigerator, clean your freezer. Basically, I showed them what we do to clean a unit. This is what I want when you move out. Otherwise, you're not going to get your whole... They'd say, I have to do... Is that how you got your unit? Yes. Well, that's how we expect to receive it. And then they would realize, wow, I got to do a little bit better job when I move out. And that we're going to charge you for the dumpsters for everything that you leave in there. You can, read this at your enjoyment, use it if you want, but it kind of gives them an idea. Notify the utility companies and all things like that. Okay. Keys and locks. So monitoring, HUD's going to review your current year and 2 prior years unless it reveals non-compliance. In which case I've seen them go back into one they did last year all the way to 2016. Okay. So they will go backwards. They're going to do that sample inspection, the greater of 10 units or 10% of all your units. They're going to look at your client files, the greater of 10 files or 10% of all your files. Maintenance and inspection. Who's responsible for the preparation of work orders? Are work orders numbered and logged? Is there a backlog of work orders? How old is the oldest work order? Provide an explanation of the backlog. Are all work orders approved prior to the initiation of work? Are all work orders approved by someone of authority other than the person performing the work? Okay. So that's the maintenance inspection monitoring plan and one of the things that they look at for an adequate system. Does your supervisor monitor work order progress to ensure completion? Test your work order system activities against actual work accomplished to determine if the system is operating as intended. Select random sampling of work orders, see the general instructions. Compare the work orders to your procurement activities. Coordinate with your procurement system if necessary. Are inspections of units completed and fully documented in the files? Review the files of the units that were inspected on site. Locate in the participant files pre- and post-occupancy inspection reports. So they're going to look for those. Identify any work that was needed prior to occupancy. Locate in the work order system and or participants file work items that were identified during the pre-occupancy inspection. Is there evidence that confirms the work was completed prior to occupancy? So this is what HUD's looking at. So you got to make sure that you address it. So determine if your planned work resulting from your inspection reports is appropriately scheduled in the work order system. Do you have work orders maintained in a file for the work? Do they identify the responsible party for the payment, the recipient or the tenant, in some cases a home buyer? Has work identified by inspection been completed? Was work required completely and satisfactorily? Is it completed in a timely fashion? If not completed timely, ensure a large test sample to determine whether the problem is systematic or isolated to just a few cases. So we had an average cost of sending our maintenance guys out. Okay. And then we had a list of, screen replacement, basically for all the stuff that they commonly get called. So we would know if you want them to come in, it's going to be probably this, this amount of money, and they could make an estimate. We allowed our maintenance guys to work on our mutual help homes and bill for that. Okay. We build the program for that. Build the tenant, within the program for that, I should say, because we wanted those units upheld, and taken care of also. So if the resident is available, discuss repairs, satisfaction with the work, timeliness, etc. Do your files contain records to document repairs were conducted as a result of an inspection? If not, determine if the problem again is isolated or systematic or widespread through the recipient's organization. Is there follow-up maintenance work completed to ensure quality workmanship, inspection reports, correspondent, etc.? What does the recipient do to verify work quality and completion? Do you properly evaluate the quality and accurately track completion time? Test a random sample of completed work orders. Test work orders against the recipient's work order control system to ensure that that system is current and adequate to track open work orders. If there are problems, identify the problems if they're systematic or isolated cases. Based on the results of the review, does the recipient have sufficient staff to meet your maintenance requirements for your existing housing stock? Do you have excessive staff to meet the maintenance requirements? The rule of thumb used to be 1 full-time maintenance person for every 50 units, depending on your local circumstances. So, question, do you inspect your new tenant housing units more than once a year? Yes, no, or I don't know. And guys, that is your last question. So, thank you very, very much for all of it, for listening to me, for continuing to come back. I hope you learned something, guys. If you ever need anything, my information is right there. Make sure you do our poll. And thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed the class. Brooke, are you there?
All right, folks, I am putting the link to the webinar feedback survey as well as the link to download today's presentation slides into that chat for you. Just a friendly reminder that the numerous resources that Cheryl referenced throughout the webinar presentation, those are going to be available in the courses section. There's like 35 of them, so that's way too many links for me to put in here, but there are 2 pages within the course where you can go through and download a copy of all of those for yourself. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That's going to be next week on Tuesday. This will be about land acquisition planning from Amy Wilson. And then you can access this as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel now. There is a whole playlist called Cathedra Webinar Archive, and you can go through our webinar recordings from about the past 2 years. You can check out our upcoming events. They're posted to our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can also listen to our in-house produced podcast, the Hope and Think a Native American podcast. That's available wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you prefer to view the interviews that we have with our guests to see them, then you can view that on our YouTube channel as well. All right, folks. Oh, and then I want to give a shout out. We're sending out the save the date today, but we are doing a maintenance for tribal housing in-person training, and that's going to be happening March 6th and 7th. The trainer for that, our instructor, is going to be Jeff Ackley Jr. He is the current chairman of Lakes Indian Housing Association, and he's also the executive director of his tribe's housing authority. So we're very, very excited about that. So just want to give a little shout out. Be on the lookout for more information on that. We're going to be opening registration as well. Cheryl, thank you so much for an incredible week of webinars. This has been absolutely fantastic. So much valuable information. Again, folks, I really encourage you to go to that courses section, and that will give you the opportunity to download everything. I'll actually pull up the intro slide real quick where I can show you exactly what I'm talking about when I say to go to the courses section. Here we go. So if you're looking at that red panel, maybe you just see an icon, maybe you see the full word courses, but that is where you can pull up a list of all the webinars that we've been doing since we moved to this new platform. And you'll see one called NAHASDA Essentials. So that'll have the recording as well as the presentation slides for every day this week. And that is where you can download all of those valuable resources that Cheryl has put together for you. Oh, you're getting some love in the chat, Cheryl.
Yep, I am. Thank you.
All right, folks, give her some love on the webinar feedback survey too, please. The link is right there for you in the chat. Sorry, y'all, I'm shameless. Here we go. But really, we appreciate y'all coming in each day this week. You know, you could spend your time anywhere, and we really appreciate that you opted to spend it with us on the webinars this week. So once again, thank you, Cheryl. I am going to go ahead and close out, folks. I hope everybody has an amazing rest of your day, rest of your weekend. Cheryl, safe travels when you leave Florida. I hope you continue to enjoy the weather. And we'll all talk again real soon. All right. Bye,
guys.